The Washington Commanders made it all the way to the NFC Championships, and more importantly, they have found their franchise quarterback as Jayden Daniels had an amazing rookie year. Probably, I would say easiest rookie of the year candidate. I think now at this point that we can think back to pretty recent memory. But we're going to go in the 2025 offseason, and Ryan and I we're going to break down what you can expect the Commanders to address and go after in this 2025 offseason and potentially in the draft as well. But before we get into that, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and tackle that bell to get notified when new videos of the Tracy Take come out. While you're at it, leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you want to see the Commanders do this offseason and why. And Ryan, let's pull the stats up right here. Great overall season for Washington and the Commanders here. I do think it's amazing how just like top down leadership absolutely like could change just the overall dynamic of an organization. You know, Dan Snyder selling the team, and I should have looked this up earlier, but Josh Harris, I'm pretty sure, is
Mhm.
the new owner of the Commanders, and he did a great job bringing in Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn is a very experienced, as you can tell right here as a Falcons fan, very experienced head coach. You bring in Cliff Kingsbury, he has head coach experience, and still I think one of the better offensive young minds in the league, and he just and they just hit things off immediately with Jayden Daniels. And so Dan Quinn did a great job with his defense. Cliff Kingsbury doing a great job with this offense and with Jayden Daniels. And there's still some clear areas that they need to improve on. But they at times were almost unstoppable on that offense with how well they were able to run the ball and with how well this offensive line was doing. But Ryan, I want to throw it over to you here. What was your overall thoughts on Jayden Daniels' rookie year, the Commanders in 2024, and start to talk a little bit about some areas you think they need to improve on this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think for starters, that offensive line could be improved. Not they were allowing a lot more sacks at the beginning of the season than at the end, and they definitely did improve. But I still feel like Brandon Coleman, their third round pick from last year, is going to be better at guard. So getting a high end left tackle there is going to be important. The other thing is getting a Terry McLaurin is a fantastic receiver, but getting another weapon, I think, in that receiving room. Dyami Brown had a good season. Zach Ertz had a good season as well. But if you can get one more piece in that receiving room, I think that's going to be really important. T. Higgins might be a name that we talk about a little bit later in this movie if he does hit or in this
This
episode.
movie called
Yeah,
Life.
yeah. In this episode, if if we start talking about receivers and whatnot, but I think all in all, offensively, Jayden Daniels, he made up for a lot. The rushing offense was really good, thanks largely due to Jayden Daniels and his scrambling ability. And honestly, like some of the design runs that Cliff Kingsbury would do were really smart. And then also too, like just some of the play designs and making things easy on Jayden Daniels. We saw that like that Lions play where Terry McLaurin busts the 60-yard screen pass. Like it was just a simple numbers thing. Basically, like they put uh uh trips out to the left and the safety crash. So Jane Daniels is like, I got a 3-on-2 out there.
Mhm.
Like it'd be stupid not to throw it. So and Terry McLaurin was really good and made somebody miss and ran it in for the touchdown. So like there's just things like that. Defensively, they could be a little bit better against the run. They invested in Marshawn Lattimore via a trade at the trade deadline. I thought defensively they improved a lot as the season went on. I know like their efforts against the Eagles weren't that great, but I think in the trenches they could be a little bit better. Also, pass rush I think is going to be something that they really need to improve upon, just from the edge rush position. I know they were 12th with 42 sacks there, but they did lack, I think, like a true like dominant edge rusher at times, and I feel like that's something that they could look to target in this really deep edge class.
Well, and so one of the things too, just specifically with that, and I think a lot of these guys are going to be free agents if you want to go on to the next slide here. But like Dante Fowler led the team with 10.5 sacks. Frankie Louvu had 8 sacks. Dorrance Armstrong, he had 5 sacks. Those are your top three. And if
Mhm.
I'm not mistaken, I think all of them are free agents. I'm trying to find their names here.
Dante
Uh,
Fowler's there.
Frankie
Uh,
Louvu, I thought was on there. Maybe not. I could be wrong on that. And then Doris Armstrong Jr. Maybe it's just Dante Fowler. So, but either way, though, so Fowler's 30, Louvu's 28, and Doris Armstrong's 27. So, especially too, if Louvu and Armstrong come back, but I think you still want to go get that younger edge rusher, that guy that can come in.
yeah.
Klein Farrell was the guy that I was thinking of. He has 3.5 sacks um,
Mhm.
on the year, and he also too, for what it's worth, it's I had Dante Fowler here as edge, but also Frankie Louvu. He's technically, according to Pro Football Reference, is a linebacker.
Yeah.
as well. So, but another key guy, linebacker as well, Bobby Wagner, 34-year-old veteran. He had an amazing season. Does he want to come back, run it back another year? So that's what's going to be interesting. And the Commanders, they have the third most cap space as of right now. So they're going to be doing a lot of moves. If Bobby Wagner wants to come back to the Commanders, they'll pay him. I think they'll pay him like not top linebacker in the league, but I think they'll kind of give him what he wants to kind of what's fair also too. But then
Yeah,
how do they
top
want
10.
to yeah. And so what secondary guys do they want to bring back? And real quick, going back to Bobby Wagner, I think that same thing applies to Zach Ertz as well. Zach Ertz was the number 2 leading receiver on the team. And so if they want to bring back these veteran guys, if they want to run it back again, that's great. But I think one of the other things too is going to be interesting when it looks at their draft is how do they get younger in some of these key areas where you still have that same efficiency, but at the same time though, getting younger and maybe even having guys that can provide even better efficiency as well.
Yeah, and that is where I think push comes to shove is can you get young leaders in the door because they have these veteran leaders that came in and that worked out for them. Actually, it worked out at like an extremely high rate also.
Mhm.
So good job for the front office at the Commanders of doing that. But all good teams that are consistently in the playoffs and playing in conference championship games and with a chance to go to the Super Bowl, they draft well. I mean, I know the Eagles went and got AJ Brown via a trade, but they drafted Jalen Hurts, they drafted Devontae Smith, they drafted almost all of their offensive linemen except Mekhi Becton. They drafted that defense almost wholly. So you go look at what the Commanders did. They supplemented a lot of uh, bad drafts with a really good free agent class in 2024, and they're going to have to start stacking that young talent that's going to come in and fill the shoes of those players, not just on the field but in the locker room and as a leader. So I think that's going to be really important, kind of as we move into some of their free agent targets and draft targets. So Cam Robinson and Alaric Jackson, two guys that have been playing left tackle at a high level for a good bit of time. Alaric Jackson is younger. Cam Robinson is more of the veteran option. Josh Uche, Chase Young, if he wants to come back to Washington, I think would be an interesting option there. But there are a few other edge guys I think in this free agency class that could be of interest. And I think going over to the draft targets, Michael Williams, James Pierce Jr., Jack Sawyer, I think are all going to be interesting options at that point in the draft. I think James Pierce Jr. might go a little bit higher
Yeah.
than 29th overall at this point, but still, like the idea is right of going and getting a really, really solid edge rusher. So JT Tuimoloau is also there. Princely Uman Miel and Kyle Kennard. There's so many guys. Mike Green, I think, is also going to go higher than this, but if he falls down here, that would be tremendous value as well. And then Ariante Ursary is going to be another left tackle option. Josh Connerly is an option there as well. There are a few guys at that spot. Anthony Belton has played well at the Senior Bowl, but we'll kind of have to see what his draft stock looks like at the end of it all. But it's going to be really interesting to see kind of what they do. They've done a good job of establishing a team and kind of put themselves in maybe a little bit of a best player available scenario. One position that we haven't touched on yet on this slide is secondary, cornerback specifically. Marshall Lattimore they just traded for, but he started to have some injury issues, even though he's only about 28. But still getting some young corner play, I think would be solid. And
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of continue to invest in a solid youth group that are going to come in and be really good players for them in the long run.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure he's going to be a free agent also too, if I'm not mistaken.
Marshawn Lattimore?
I thought so. I thought that's why they traded him because he was going to be free agent at the end of the year. But I could be wrong on that. Let
I
me look.
don't see him on the list here.
It is possible that I made that mistake.
Um,
Or did they just trade him just to get rid of him?
they might have traded him and then the
So he has a potential out in 2025, it looks like, but no, it doesn't look like he has 2 more years of uh,
of
free
team
agency.
control.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
So according
Okay.
to Spot Track, so
So they could cut him and save like 50 or 36 million over the next 2 years. So that would be interesting.
they'd want even more space to it. I think it would be interesting if you put him in
Yeah.
a Dan Quinn offense. Yeah, if you put him in a Dan Quinn defensive system, I do think that would be very interesting. I
Yeah.
will say, as a Falcons fan, I did just like watching Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans kind of fight for 60 minutes. So it was neat to kind of see that once again in the playoffs in a little bit more serious setting. But that being said, though, too, it is like I still think he's a very, very solid corner. Probably even like that's maybe an understatement as well. Put
Yeah.
him in that team. But to your point, though, still maybe get a younger corner that you can maybe groom, a guy that has a lot of potential talent, would be something that they would want to focus on in the draft.
Yeah, and then also too, I touched on it. T. Higgins, I think, is a potential free agent target. They also could go after like a Stephon Diggs or like a Darius Slayton. It is like a tier below both of those guys, but
Yeah.
there's also a good bit of wide receivers that I think would fit well. The one that piques my interest the most is going to be Jayden Higgins. I've mentioned him in a few other videos, but he's had a really good Senior Bowl. He showed some pretty good vertical separation, showed the ability to get released off the line of scrimmage in press man coverage at the Senior Bowl a couple of times. So he's a guy that can be moved all around the formation, but he caught 9 touchdowns in the red zone this past season. Very good in contested catch situations. So I think that's going to be really interesting to kind of watch as this draft process goes along. As right now, I think he's like a early day 2 guy, but I think could be a potential late first round pick there for a team that wants to take a chance on him. So all in all, Commanders are in a really good spot going forward. They really flipped this franchise around. So let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this episode here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, go ahead and leave a comment on what you thought of the Commanders 2024 season and what you want to see them do in this 2025 offseason. And other than that, we will see you guys next time.